Hello and welcome to Liberal PR. That is my catchy little title for the art of public relations and social movements. Today we're going to be talking about specifically what types of social movements there are and how they employ public relations. Now you may be wondering, why would I care about public relations? I like the social movements, but what do I do in PR? Well, in the broader stream of media, you function as a PR specialist. You are constantly representing yourself, your profession, and even your social movements. That can be a little terrifying if you think about it, because everything you say might impact someone who then might like or dislike your movement based on the things that you've said. It's a circle that can feed pretty violently on itself if you're not aware of what you're saying on social media. Public relations is the study of how an organization, group, government, or individual can relate to the public. This was traditionally practiced through spin doctors who would manipulate messages to coerce the public. That's not good PR. The problem with that, of course, is that it's unethical. It negotiates with the truth, it includes gaslighting, and it's just unreasonable. You may have negative connotations with PR because of this reason. However, lately in modern times, PR has reformed itself to be a more civic engagement focused practice, meaning that industries, companies will practice something called conscious capitalism. Conscious capitalism is the theory that if an organization is working to be ethical day in and day out, their PR specialists won't need to lie or manipulate or coerce. In short, their PR specialists will be able to actually help them by telling the truth. This is the kind of PR that we want to focus on. Now, public relations, put simple, is just your relation to the public, how you perceive them, how they perceive you. This concept of PR and social movements is not dissimilar from an interpersonal relationship. Obviously, we don't want to gaslight anyone we know. We don't want to manipulate them or deny their perception of reality. We don't want to yell at them or name call them or otherwise harass them. At the same time, there are plenty of tactics we can use to convince them, such as rhetoric and empirical argument, passion and sharing of our emotions, our complex thoughts, our needs. We can also relate to them, find points of connection, and try to unify with them. Whatever you're standing for, whatever you're trying to change in society, you are doing that through public relations. When you share a meme, when you circulate information or misinformation, you are trying to convince others. And if your goal is to convince others, it behooves you to know exactly how to do that. You should be able to say exactly what strategy you're using at any given time. And this extends as well to your social movements. Now, there are three types of social movements that I'm looking at in my research, and to outline them, I will be parroting two that were researched by Kenneth of Brigham Young University. Boulding specified that there are protest and educational movements. I personally have added a third, social movements, but we'll get into it. So the first, we're going to start with the good old protest movement. Now, you know this. This is where you get your picket signs and you march in the streets, you yell things that are exciting, and they sometimes rhyme, and these movements can be quite powerful and fun to take part in. According to Kenneth, a protest movement needs to be shrill, obstreperous, undignified, and careless of a pattern of existing legitimacy. This means that protest movements are actively trying to tear down the status quo. They're emotionally gratifying, they are clean, they produce beautiful imagery, things that carry well into the scores of history. And when we're talking about the role of PR, a protest movement can be incredibly impactful incredibly quickly. People will see scenes they never could have imagined, they'll see evidence of oppression that they'd been blind to before. At the same time, these movements do face a backlash because they are socially complex. A problem with protest movements, as outlined by Kenneth, is that they can sometimes spark a reaction that is stronger than themselves. So if a protest movement were to devolve into a riot, the backlash in the mainstream media would be greater than the movement itself. Instead of the message that the movement is trying to promote, you may have a media claiming entirely that the movement is full of rioters who have no sense for what they're doing, and they're just angry people without any idea of their actual message. This can be a harsh problem. It is also why protest movements don't do as well when there is no educational effort being made. Kenneth also made mention of educational movements. Now, he said they need to be low-keyed and they need to be respectful of existing legitimacy. This means that they will try to mirror the status quo in order to have a more receivable, diplomatic kind of message. Now, when I was younger, I fully believed that educational movements were the end-all, be-all of social movements. I was convinced, surely, if people just sat down and talked with one another, they would come to understand that human rights are important and significant, and people are people, and you should love them. Nowadays, I'm less naive. Well, a little less naive. But I do believe that educational movements can be important. The only problem with these movements is that they are very, very slow. They take a very long time to make progress because you are constantly trying to give information to a populace that doesn't want to hear it. You may also have to sterilize or censor your points to be more palatable to the general public, and this can be not super effective, and especially not quickly. Also, these movements depend on the fact that hearts and minds can be changed, and while I do believe they can, it can take quite a while, or not happen at all. If there's a swing against these movements, they will falter because they didn't come with strength to begin with. In the end, though, educational movements can be quite impactful. They just take about 20 years. Our third and final movement is the social movement. Now, social movements are not concerned with reaching out to the public. In fact, they barely practice PR. But what they do, and this is a practice in modern PR, is they correlate their internal structure in a way that is healthy for all the participants. While Boulding never mentioned the social movement, he did mention that movements can be weakened if their object or intention is not clear, i.e. if a movement springs out of nothing and there is a fractured opinion among its supporters, it might be weak, it may not get its message out to the media, it may not be very effective in communicating its needs. Social movements are quite productive, however, in getting a message to stick, and not only many messages, but one message. Even an intersectional movement can find a unified message if they are in the same social space working together for progressive change. Social movements are great because they output a bunch of activists who then know how to speak about their issues. They are also just good places for people to take out emotional needs. If you have witnessed something horrible because of your culture or your society, your race, your gender, you can seek support in these movements. So, social movements are something to consider as well. All three of these movement types are basically elements of PR as they are expressed in a social movement. They can change, they can fluctuate, they can work with one another. In fact, in the end of this, spoiler alert, my entire intention is to declare to you that you need all three. So, if you are going to jump off here, you might want to consider different types of social movements, how they express public relations, and how you, as a public relations agent online, can support or hinder them, depending on the way you speak. But yeah, that's going to do it. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you look at the next ones. If you don't, that's chill. Just think about what you're tippy-tapping on your iPhones and have a lovely, wonderful, good old-fashioned day.